Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us here on this YouTube channel. My name is Anubha Bhonsle. I'm an independent journalist, and I do the news here without noise. Now, one of the reasons for attempting to do some of these longer conversations here on this YouTube channel is to focus on issues and subjects long after they have vanished from the headlines. Two, to allow for conversations that don't fit in easy binaries, a black or white, or a yes or no, or a this way or that way. And number three, and perhaps most importantly, to allow for authentic, real, and intimate conversations that allow people to both reflect on their inner struggles and articulate them, and thus enable to understand the world around us a little better. My guest today is someone you've possibly seen in the media or have read about her. She is a strong, strident, passionate, and a gritty voice, and she spoke with great eloquence, especially in the aftermath of the Hathras case. I'm being joined on this Sunday afternoon by Kiruba Munusamy. Kiruba, thank you very much for sparing this time to speak to me.
Hello, Anubha.
I am curious about your name. What does it mean? Is there a backstory to it?
No, nothing. So Kiruba is a common name in Tamil Nadu, but I'm really proud that it's a gender-neutral name. So yeah, Kiruba is named both for men and women. So yeah, and it's a normal name. But in Tamil Nadu, we never used to have any surnames. So we have initials. So I used to write my name as M. Kiruba for so long, and then my father passed away in 2011. And then I kind of felt that I should have his name with me, because he is a very brave father who wanted to educate his three daughters when the entire world was telling him not to. And I myself have witnessed many of his colleagues would say him, "Sir, you have had three daughters, you need to marry them off. Why are you spending so much money on their education?" Then my father would say, "It's none of your business, and if I give them education, they would take care of their entire lives, and I wouldn't have to worry about them." And he had even disconnected himself from many such toxic relationships, might be friendship or official relationships. But I have seen him; he had totally distanced himself from people who have asked not spend money on our education. And also my mother was also an ordinary woman, and she had never seen the world, and she's she was very strong, but still she didn't had any exposure to the real world. So she thought if we study, we would just will be able to lead a dignified life. And that one small idea led to the education of us. And my eldermost sister is a doctor now. My elder sister is an engineer, and I'm a lawyer. And this was decided at her birth. So when my eldermost sister was born, my father thought that medical profession is one of the most respected profession in the Indian society, and there had been no doctors in our entire generation, in our entire community. I mean, in the place we were born. So he thought making a daughter, the first daughter, doctor, would bring dignity to the family. And then my elder sister born, and he thought one doctor and one engineer would be the perfect ideal family. And then when I was born, he thought I should have my own unique profession where I'll shine, and I don't feel threatened by my sister, or I don't feel as someone who is already doing something which is common. So he thought I should pursue law, and he was also in some way he predicted that I would make a great lawyer someday. He saw me argue so many things in my childhood, and he foresaw our future, and he was a very strong father who always thought of our future and education. And I honestly felt that it's my duty to take his name across the world, and that's why I started writing my name as Kiruba Munusamy. And again, it came as a stigma because Munusamy is a very very Dalit name. in Tamil Nadu. So no Brahmin or no dominant caste communities would have such a name. So when I say Munusamy, they would be like, what? Why your name is so local, and it's why don't you have a modern name? It's very outdated and all. But I feel very proud about my roots. So when somebody, and the first time I came abroad, when somebody called me Miss Munusamy, I was really happy. Okay, finally I have taken my father's name abroad.
And doing it so proud, right? Not
Yes.
just taking the name, but making it so proud.
Yes.
I have read so much, and I have seen many of your appearances on digital and on television news channels in the aftermath of Hathras. So I think I made the mistake of not even saying that you're a Supreme Court advocate. I would sort of just presume that everyone would know about it. So I apologize for that, Kiruba. I want to just start a little bit sort of repeating many of the things that you've said in the aftermath of Hathras, but I think I noticed that there was a pattern. In the comments that you were making, you were perhaps also articulating how things would play out. You talked about a lot of emphasis on the crime initially, if it was brutal enough, as if brutality is a parameter, a lot of attention to it, and then sort of a familiar cycle of conspiracy theories coming, and soon it vanishes from the headlines, and it vanishes from the public imagination, so to speak. In some ways, Kiruba, people would say that's happened with Hathras already, or the death of the young girl already. What about the last few weeks angers you the most?
I think the very question about how caste is relevant in Hathras case was the most outraging question, because we all know caste exists and we practice caste in a day-to-day basis, and we know we won't marry our daughters or sons to somebody who is out of our caste, and we are criticizing reservation every day, and we are dehumanizing people who have get into an educational institution through reservation. And if you take the online social media platform, people are abused for their caste, for their political ideology. And whenever they wanted to abuse, they bring my beef eating habit, and it's related to my caste, it's related to my culture. So we know that we practice caste, but the hypocrisy of not admitting or acknowledging the existence of caste is what outraged me a lot, because people were talking about Black Lives Matter, and they were really concerned about how the police brutality was committed against African American communities in the USA. But also in India, they were outraging for the custodial death of Jairaj and Phoenix. But Dalits and Muslims have been brutalized in the police custody and by the Indian institution for so long. But for the simple reason that they all enjoy a kind of privilege from the caste system, they don't want to admit or acknowledge that caste is a primary factor in any violence. And there was a journalist who wrote, "Don't politicize it." And I was like, what? Women issues have been for so long considered as personal issues, as family issues. And the feminist movements and women rights movements politicized it. And only then they were able to bring a change even in the law, which already guarantees right to equality. We adopted Indian Constitution in 1950, but when were we able to bring anti-dowry harassment law? Much later. And it took almost 60 years for us to see a Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. And even today, when we write about sexual harassment at workplace, people are not trusting us. And even through Me Too, we politicized the issue of sexual harassment and domestic violence and so many issues. But when there is a violence against a Dalit woman, which is primarily caste motivated, even women who have already been very vocal about women's rights are not ready to admit, because they think they have a kind of leverage by speaking as a woman. And if they bring caste in, then they would have to give away the privilege and the leverage. And then Dalit women at one point of time, they'll gain the prime focus, prime attention. So they didn't want it. They always want to be in the limelight. And they always have wanted to take all the glory of women's rights. And, educating people about caste is really tiring, because We too studied in the same educational system. We too studied the same curriculum, but our lived experiences allowed us to explore outside our educational system, and we started reading so many things, and we started thinking as a human being, and that what led to the common sense of understanding an issue from one person's experience. And I didn't ask them to be very empathetic towards us or sympathetic towards us, but at least keeping quiet and letting people express their views is really important. That freedom of expression is what that shapes the very essence of humanity.
I think
And that freedom of,
sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I think, yeah, so even women have been fighting for their expression of choice in choosing their life partners, right? Even in the Hadia case and many other cases. So by asking us to not talk about our caste experiences or about politicizing or non-politicizing it, they are, obstructing our very right of freedom of expression.
I want to go back to something you said about your mother and the notion that, education or a good education could be a leveler or could sort of help you lead a more dignified life. Did that happen?
Yeah, of course. So I think education has uplifted many Dalit families.
Mm.
And I think in a way right now I have made a way for me, and right now I can express what I want, and my ways is loud and clear.
Mm.
And if I had not been educated, I don't think this would have happened ever.
And
And
what about
also,
the years and months while you were getting that education? What about your experiences in school or college? Was that devoid of the Dalit identity?
yeah, of course, as usual, I too faced so many discrimination. I was treated different for various reasons. I wouldn't say just because of caste. I studied in a Christian school from first standard to fifth standard, and it's because there were no schools around our slums. Only Christian institutions would run a small English medium schools. And when my parents decided to give us education, they decided it would be in English. And for many Dalit households, English is kind of liberating language, and there is a temple for English lady in the north, and they celebrate English as a goddess. And Ambedkar was able to achieve so many things, and he brought the attention towards Dalit liberation, and he brought in many, very progressive provisions into the constitution because he he had access to English education. And Phule, for so long, so it's just not about us, but it's about Dalit movement itself. So having access to English education is really important. And I studied in that school. Whereas, despite the fact it's a matriculation Christian school, from my LKG to fifth standard, my class leaders were always a Brahmin boy. There were two boys. I still remember the names, Sundar and Girish. I can't forget this. Every time, either this Girish will be the class leader or this Sundar will be the class leader. And also the first and second ranks will always be them. It was something which I couldn't figure out why.
As a child, did you realize then that there was a caste dynamic that played out, or a
Of
gender
course,
dynamic
because
that played out? Did you realize it at that time?
no. Even during my school, because he used to say, very proudly that he is a Brahmin guy. Otherwise, how would we know what is Brahmin? And also, every time when there is a selection for drama practice or anything, I would volunteer because I was very much interested in theater, play, and all. But they would always make me stand at the back because I'm dark. Okay, and throughout my childhood, from my school to my college, I've always felt ashamed of telling the place I come from, the locality I come from, because I was born and brought up in a slum. And if I tell the name of my slum, people would think it's a neighborhood of criminals. Only criminals would live in that place. And every time I had a friend, and if they ask me where are you coming from, I would just lie that this is not my place, this is that. And I have to lie with my friends. And then only after coming to the higher secondary school, I stopped lying with my friends, with my classmates. I didn't even now I realize that they were not my friends, they were just my classmates, acquaintance. And after one point of time, when I look back, I have had no friends throughout my school. Throughout my school, I have always been alone. Then I also realized that I have always have to push myself into some circles because they wouldn't take me as a person from their circle. And when I went to the law college, I was the only day scholar in the entire classroom, and every other person were from different cities. So they had already come to the city and they were staying in a hostel or in a house. So they knew each other. But I was a very naive person going to the law college for the first day, having so many dreams of having a very different life because people would come from different cities, different states, and they wouldn't know what it means to come from a place that I come from my locality. So I was thinking that I would have a very different experience. But the first day when I entered into my classroom, people were already sitting in groups. They have already become friends. Then only the last bench was free and I had to sit in the last bench. I managed it for 3 years, but all of a sudden it struck me that why should I sit at the last bench when I deserve to be in the first bench? Then I tried to come early and sit on the first bench on a fine day. But the other 4 girls who came later, they sat beside me and they somehow pushed me down from the first bench when the entire class was sitting, and all the boys were looking at me and they were laughing at me. But still, I stood up, I went to the last bench, I sat on the last bench. But today, if I look at my classmates, none of them are practicing, girls especially. They are either housewives or, they are working in some other concern. No one is practicing law. And even if they practice, no one had reached the Supreme Court. And no one have the courage as I do to, come out with my identity and then, make strong arguments about what I feel and, why I feel so. And now if people call me, they say, Kiruba, I used to tell a lot about you to my husband, and he really feels very happy that I'm your friend. And their family members are very happy to know who I am. And I feel like, oh my God, you are the very same people you pushed me down.
So I think, Kiruba, people who are hearing this conversation perhaps may have a question as to why do you believe at that point in time it was about caste, and now when they're wanting to get in touch with you or make a connection or even sort of claim your success to some extent or be close to you, why is that not about caste?
So I think caste is, not in a very specific form of violence, but it's something which is intrinsic to who we like and why we like. It not necessarily have to be in, if you argue about caste with some non-Dalit or upper caste people, then they would immediately talk about reservation because they think caste is in reservation. And also when you talk about violence, they say, yeah, see, this person has been murdered, very bad. And they think caste is in violence. But caste is in how do you like a person? Why most of us like a particular kind of appearance and we are not liking other particular color, skin color, And also in the movies, a North Madras or a person coming from a slum would be the rowdy who commits all the crime. And they are ugly. They don't know how to romance. What this kind of expressions teach us. So for so long, we have been taught that persons coming from a particular background are people who don't fit to be in our circles. So this naturally comes to us. When we hear about one person coming from a particular location, it's just not about that particular person's behavior, but who he would be because he's coming from a particular background, right?
What is your earliest sort of marker of caste? When did you sort of know about caste? When did you know about your own identity? When did you hear the word Dalit for the first time?
So I came to know about the word Dalit much later in my life. In fact, after coming to practice in the High Court of Madras in 2008. But the first caste marker would be the feeling of shame when I had to tell my locality. So why I am not able to tell the birthplace I come from with all the proud others are doing. And also when I was in the teenage, people used to flirt with every other girl in the bus Okay, we used to come from bus. And I still remember a boy, he tried to flirt with me, but he saw me getting down in a particular bus stop. That bus stop would lead only to our slum.
Mm.
And that bus stop was a bus stop we fought. We struggled and we protested to have a stop for us, for the school going children. And when the moment I got down in that bus stop, he realized that I'm coming from that locality and he stopped saying at me. Then the next time I tried talking to him, then he ashamed me. He slut shamed me.
Mm.
But he was the one who instigated the conversation, and I was ashamed in front of 10 other male members in his group. And how do you think sexual violences happen? So in this occasion, I didn't initiate anything further because I realized that this is what happens. But imagine if a girl is very naive and she wanted to pursue this relationship and she's badly in love with him, she would have pursued. And what would the gang would do to her? And this is
How
what
old were
happened
you?
in Brazil.
How old were you when this particular incident?
14.
I saw in some of your tweets you talk about Dalit women in desire and how men respond. Is that something that is there a string to that as you've grown older as well?
Yeah, of course. So people will talk to me. They'll share even very personal things, but they have never had any idea of having a romantic relationship with me. And every time they say, no, 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 you're a very good friend, but I don't feel that love. Because if you fall in love, then it's a commitment. You have to think your future with that person. And they were not for a single time able to see me as someone, who would give up a particular status in the Indian society. So it's all about status, whom you marry. And when you take that person on the streets, you would have to feel proud. And I'm very open about my identity. They can't even conceal it among their relatives. They would easily know. And nextly, they are men are very afraid of women who are very political, very vocal. And they feel that just by getting into a relationship with us, they might be powerless, and we would overtake them in every other aspect. And this is not something very specific to me, even to my friends, my sisters, everyone. So there are exceptions. I wouldn't say that all Dalit women are experiencing this, but that exception is very rare of the rarest cases, but not common. If you ask most of the Dalit women, this is their experience. They would be very close. They would go out together. At times even sexual intercourse could also happen. But when it comes to committed relationship and recognizing that relationship through marital status or through any other recognition, through any other ways, they won't recognize it because they don't like it. And when I tweeted that, I received so many messages from Dalit women. They all exclaimed that this thing has happened to me so many times, Kiruba, but I was not able to think it in this perspective. And there were many women who wrote their experiences on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Then I realized, yes, look at these girls. We are all on the same ship. This is what happens to us.
I mean, I'm sorry, the question may seem a bit naive, but have people come and said this to you on your face ever?
Always. So that is why I'm telling caste is just not in violence. Caste is in rejection. Every time they reject you to take to their home, every time they reject you to, come for a lunch together, or every time they reject you for any other simple reason, which might be civil, non-violent, that is caste. So caste is practiced in a very subtle and nuanced manner. That's what we have been trying to tell. Caste is just not about violence. It's about what you practice on a day-to-day basis. Caste is how you treat a person and your willingness to, take them to the greater extent you would explore with any other person.
I just want to recount a small thing that happened in my college. And of course, I come from a point of a lot of privilege and a lot of protection. That was my background. But this was in college, where I remember a teacher asked us all to raise our hands if we ever thought about caste. And in the hubris of sort of young age and all the adrenaline, a lot of us raised our hands to say that no, we don't think about caste, and caste doesn't exist, and everyone is equal. And yes, there's inequity in the world, but our aim should be a caste-less society, or indicating that we are caste blind. And our teacher smiled at us and said, the only people in this country who do not know their caste or who do not know about their caste are quote unquote the so-called upper caste, so to speak, who have no lived reality of what caste means. I mean, many years have passed since that hubris. I'm hoping I've left much of that behind. I want to talk to you a little bit about how we frame this as upper caste. Isn't that a problematic framing by itself?
Yeah, of course. So I used to, refer to them as dominant caste, but at one point of time, Savarna, and there are so many terms that we would use to refer to the groups. But, sometimes we have to we have to use the mainstream references to make some people understand. It's just not about what we feel. For instance, in the case of Hathras, we first started hashtagging with the girl's name. Then the mainstream society thinks the family's dignity is just in a name, not in their life, But we as Dalit women, we were not able to call her like an object. Hathras. No. She was a woman with flesh and blood. How could you not tell her name? The law might think disclosing a victim's identity is for her protection, but when she is no more, when her survival itself is challenged and she is gone and the perpetrators are still protected, what would you do? Even if it had if it was my sister, I would have openly spoken about her name. And that's what Nirbhaya's mother also did, right? She was very proud to say that my daughter's name is Jyoti Singh Pandey. Because we are not ashamed by the fact that we are brutalized. Our dignity is not in just our names. It's in the way you allow us to live. It's in the way that we are fighting with this bloody casteist country.
I saw a lot of comments that you got when you sort of tried to point out what were obvious differences between how the Nirbhaya case was handled, and I'll continue to call her that, versus this particular one that happened in Uttar Pradesh. You pointed out about that treatment in Singapore. You pointed out to many other things as to how that case sort of reached its conclusion, as to how this case, not just from the perspective of media, but society at large. Did you get a lot of, I believe you got a lot of messages. I saw some on your timeline. People were very angry as to why you decided to equate two extremely brutal gender-based crimes or sexual violence against two young women who, in many people's eyes, were sort of, equated in some form or the other.
So I think they always misunderstood things because they have not been in a position to look at the things as it is, and they always live in a hallucination, and that's what had led to this. Because I at no point of time invalidated the struggle of the Brahmin dominant caste women, and also I have at no point of time undermined the case of Nirbhaya. What I said was, she has been rightly treated well. She was sent to Singapore. All the medical care was taken care of, provided by the government. The Indian nation owned her. And we as women and as citizens of this country, we deserve the same kind of ownership. Why aren't we owned? That ownership comes from your caste location, and I just wanted to point it out. And nextly, I also, see how people were, outraging against Nirbhaya's case, and we went to the extent of amending the Juvenile Justice Act to just bring a minor, triable in the criminal codes. But in the case of Hathras, the Savarna Parishad came forward to support the rapists, and also the Kshatriya Workers Union, the state government with the police institution, they burned the body, they did everything. But still, if the people have the audacity to say that there is no caste relevance to this case, then we would have the courage to say that your violence is just not violence, our violence is more than that. Why are they not able to accept it? And why are they still worried about our narrations? Because they are not in a point ready to engage with it. They just insult us and they just get away. And this hypocrisy of dominant caste women is really problematic. And that is why we have always been telling that, screaming, in fact, we have been screaming that it's just not men who commit sexual violence or any other form of violence against Dalit women, but also dominant caste women. They have been complicit in many other violences, and even in the cases of sexual harassment. So how many dominant caste women have given up their romantic or marital relationships when a domestic help is reported of sexual harassment? They wouldn't. And in the Kairlanchi, a daughter and mother were paraded naked and all the women were remaining silent. In the Lakshmanpur Pate case, 8 pregnant women were killed. 5 women had their breasts chopped off. Who outraged? It's only us again. In Kathua, in Bhavri Devi's rape case, women participated in the rally that was organized by BJP. Right? So when are they going to realize how they have been complicit in these sexual violences against Dalit women and OBC lower caste women, Bahujan women? And when are they going to become accountable for all these things? So we are not worried about what they feel about our narratives, but I think we are saying what we want to say, and if they didn't want to just listen, they can just leave the place.
Kiruba, where were you in 2006, and how did you respond when the incident of Kairlanji happened and the Bhotpange family was assaulted and killed and all the brutality was meted out? How old were you? How did you react to that?
I was in my law college studying 3rd year, and I was not aware of all these things. But honestly speaking, I came into politics or any ideology only after 2008. Until then, I was a normal girl who outraged against something which I felt unjust.
Okay? Why did you make that move in 2008, or why did that shift come in 2008?
Because that is the first time I came to Chennai, Madras. Okay, I studied in my hometown throughout my college, throughout my childhood, and that was the first time ever I get out of my city for my future life. And when I came here, I was introduced to Periyar, in the Periyar movement, and the Dravidian movement office is located in Chennai. And I started going there, and then I had contacts with other Ambedkarites and Liberation Panthers Party. Honestly speaking, it's Liberation Panthers Party who introduced Ambedkar to me in a very honest manner. Otherwise, I was also having the feeling that he's from my community and he's a Dalit leader. I didn't have the clarity of looking at him as someone who he really was. And Dr. Thol Tirumavalavan, he organized a meeting at Periyar Thidal, in the Dravidian movement office, and it was the first time they were discussing exogamy, endogamy, Dr. Ambedkar, and it was so different to me. What is Ambedkar, such a big person, great personality? Why wasn't I introduced to him? Then I started reading. And when I started reading such things, I realized caste is something very bigger than that I was hoping it to be. So when I started reading such thing, I realized, and there was one point where I had to talk about Dalit women and sexual violence. And it was in 2010. And then I started looking for judgments, because I have the habit of, looking for references before I make a speech. So I don't just go to a meeting, listen somebody speak, come back and, just repeat it. I started digging into the news reports of violence against Dalit women, and Kairlanchi and many other things poured out. I was upset for a week, and it's because of the survivor guilt. And also when Hathras happened, people were asking me to talk about caste, sexual violence, gender, law, so many things. But in the end, after 2 days, I couldn't speak about it. And when a journalist called me, I was so rude to her. And after she disconnected the call, I cried a lot. Then I called her back, I apologized. And she says, Kiruba, an upper caste man would never apologize for what he did, and why are you doing it? Then I said, no, you asked how caste is relevant. And I think, I shouldn't have been rude at you. And I was totally upset. Then she remained silent for 10 minutes. I was all crying because I was having the survivor guilt. Then I was asking, when I am sitting in a very privileged, safe place, and when many other millions of Dalit sisters are in the rural areas where their very survival is challenged every day by these upper caste groups, and how these Savarna women are able to act like it doesn't matter to them. One should be so wild, and they shouldn't. I mean, I cannot stay like that. And I have seen my family. When someone is hungry, my entire community would give them food. I've seen it. And in my grandmother's house, I've seen many intercaste couples eloping and coming to our home, since my childhood. And it would be very fascinating to see them, because that girl would be from a different place and she would behave very differently. But she would marry some, my nephew, relative, cousin or somebody. And the way they come, the way they treat them, and they just become organic among us is so beautiful, And as someone who has watched many other things as such happening in my own household, I thought every other person in the world would be like that. If someone is hurt, they would feel bad. And if an injustice is happening, they would stay strong and stand up against it. But it was not that happened.
You don't believe gender can sort of transgress caste? I know gender is not a monolith, or for that matter, Savarna feminists will also not be a monolith. Do you have hope that this is a divide that perhaps could be breached? We could make each other understand? People could make each other understand their positions, or do you believe the caste formulation is so strong and so centric that the divide is far larger?
Yeah, I don't hope in the near future this gap could be bridged, because the effort is not on us. It is on the mainstream feminists, so-called mainstream feminists. And so the problem is, they know that caste exists. They know there is a difference between them and we. But at no point of time they have come forward to discuss it openly. We are not just asking them to, leave their privileges, come out overnight and become revolutionary figures. What we all ask them to just have an open conversation with an acknowledgement of the fact that caste exists. Only when you acknowledge, you could have an honest conversation that could lead to change and unity. Every time I go sit on a panel, people speak about gender, but I used to feel, what? My gender is not my problem. My caste is my problem. Many a times, and when people identify me as feminist, I would feel, no, I have never spoken for women's rights. And, I honestly don't think I have ever spoken for women's rights. And my entire focus had always been on abolishing caste, annihilating caste. And I'm a very strong political person, but people would try to frame me into this feminist thing just because I'm a woman. So this is how men are monopolizing the entire political space, maybe electoral or non-electoral. So they think if it's about caste and politics, then obviously it's Dalit men. And if it's about sexual violence and about gender, then it's me. But I have been exactly, opposite. And I, in my 11 years of legal practice, I have been to police station. I have met many deputy superintendent of police to register cases. And I have filed so many petitions, even interventions in the bail applications in the sexual violence cases. And even I have filed public interest litigations. And in all the occasion, the one thing that I felt is, it's not our gender that's denying our access to justice, but our caste. And also many times I have witnessed that Dalit men are, not as equal as the upper caste men. They have always been treated low by Savarna women. They have always been an untouchable, but people think the identity hierarchy or gender hierarchy in India is just about male, female, but it's about which male and which female.
You mentioned
So,
a whole lot of work that you've done in the legal spectrum. Two things. How was the experience in the highest court of this land, in the Supreme Court? Did your Dalit identity sort of stay outdoors when you entered those hallowed corridors? And the second question was more, what is the commonality that you've seen when you've gone about filing some of these cases, these petitions, or these interventions? What is the first starting point where that barrier comes?
so I think a Dalit could escape discrimination or any differential treatment even in a social space, but not in the judicial space, because Indian judiciary is Brahminical, totally Brahminical, and the kind of culture that they have cultivated, maybe practice, legal practice, or how they treat women, or how they handle a particular case that comes from a particular location. Everything is Brahminical, and that is the reason why for the past 10 years we didn't have a Dalit judge, and only now we have only one Dalit judge. And also when I reached the Supreme Court, when I started practicing there was no woman judge at all male judges in the Supreme Court. Okay. And whomever I saw, all were comfortably in office, and either one of the parents are already a lawyer or a powerful politician, or their husbands. Every woman, they had a lawyer husband, and even ex-law ministers, everybody were very influential, and that place was not for a first generation lawyer like me. So it was very obvious. And in the handling of cases, I filed a petition which is equivalent to Madasnana, which is a ritual in Karnataka where a particular tribal community is forced to roll over on the leftover food of other upcastes. But in Tamil Nadu, there is a culture in a district called Karur where this ritual happens in Agrahara. And Agrahara is a place where only Brahmins live, and it is constructed very close to the temple, and it has access to the river and all the other resources. And in this ritual, Brahmins will eat the food, and all the other non-Brahmin communities will roll over, because of the belief that their leftover food are very holy, and if somebody rolls over, the diseases will heal, and if unmarried, they'll easily get married. All their obstacles will fade away, and that's the belief. When I filed this petition, and when I asked that the matter to be listed on an urgent basis on the next day, because the ritual was to be performed in a week, the Chief Justice of India said, I don't think this matter is an important one. I don't think it has to be listed in an as an urgent one. And then I was pushed, because you can't speak to CJI after twice, after he said no twice. Okay, he already said no to me twice, and the security says, please move, madam, please move, madam. And then a senior counsel comes, he refers a tax matter, and he asks it to be listed as an urgent one, and he grants the motion. So the Supreme Court thinks tax matter is of greater importance than a ritual that challenges the right to life with dignity. The dignity of not any human being, but the non-Brahmin communities. Doesn't the court know it? And there was already a ban on the ritual by the very same Supreme Court. So this is how cases are handled. And they have cultivated a culture of eliteness in the Indian judicial practice. And even Fali Nariman in his book, he says that a lawyer is recognized by the chamber he comes from. Okay, if a lawyer is coming from a particular chamber, then the judges recognize them, give them more opportunities, give them acknowledgements, and encourage them. But how many first generation Dalit Bagujan lawyers are able to get into such big chambers which have breeded many judges to the judicial system? No, because it comes from the reference, and that reference converts as network, and that network is basically caste network, which comes from a social capital.
In conclusion, Kiruba, I know the onus of sort of teaching people about caste does not lie on you or many other women who have spoken out very, very articulately and added to this conversation. But if I was to ask you as a last question as to if people still thought caste doesn't exist or are caste blind, so to speak, what is the one thing you would tell them that they must do? Must read, must learn about, must watch, must hear, must sing? What is that?
I think people who are very strong enough to deny the existence of caste, I'll tell, let them rot. Okay, because you should have a open mind and willingness to learn about something. You cannot just force something into someone's mind. And we people are tired of educating about what caste is, but Dr. Ambedkar had always been educating others about how caste exists, how it operates in various platforms, but he chose his way of expressing through the articles he wanted to write. But when we are asked to write an article, we are asked to write from our personal experience. So when a journalist speak to us about caste, they want us to tell pathetic stories and cry, and they wanted to just pinpoint some violent experiences. But it's not how you get educated. If you let us free, and if we have the independence to express what caste is, how we perceive it, then I think it would be an entirely different opportunity for the non-Dalits to see something from a very different perspective, and they would in a way be intrigued to know about caste. And when I read Dr. Ambedkar, he has addressed caste in many different aspects, and that is something which is very fascinating. He writes about women oppression and caste. He writes about the caste tribunals that existed in the pre-British period, and then he again writes about what happens in the legal system and sociologically, anthropologically, and as a person, when he speaks on annihilation of caste, he sees how division of labor is justified as a scientific method by caste Hindus, but how it is actually perpetuation of caste. So that very fresh perspective is something which still stands in the field of in the caste scholarship. And in my 12 years of practice in the High Court and the Supreme Court, one thing that I realized is justice is always social and not legal. And that social justice could be achieved only by educating, by cultivating the minds. And that cultivation of mind is what I'm doing through so many events. So I'm really tired of many things, but I keep speak because cultivation of mind is everything. And Dr. Ambedkar did it with so much of dedication. He just not cultivated the minds of Dalits, but non-Dalits as well.
Right.
Yes.
On that beautiful note, Kiruba, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for continuing this effort of opening people's minds.
Thank you, Anubha. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure talking to you as well. And honestly, the recent times, I think this is a most enjoyable interview that I had. Yeah, even there are many interviews, but this was very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, Kiruba.